Hello, beautiful humans. Welcome to the Human Beauty Movement podcast, life lessons from beautiful humans. I appreciate you being with me today, wherever you're tuning in from. And speaking of that, I think it's pretty incredible that through the power of digital technology and the shift of offices to remote work, that more and more people around the world are choosing to live life untethered. At the time of this recording, there are an estimated 35 million digital nomads in the world. And if the global digital nomad movement was a country, it would rank 41st in the world in terms of population. The US alone accounts for more than 51% of digital nomads on the planet. Now, my next guest is one who has chosen to live the life nomadic. Marissa Dingler and her husband have 4 kids. After adopting her latest 2 kids, they learned how much they love showing their kids this amazing world. So she's here to talk about her experience. Welcome, Marissa. I'm so happy that you're here on the show.
Of course. Thank you so much. I'm excited.
Now, you've been doing this for 16 months or so, and you like to say that you're an ordinary family that's living an extraordinary life. But I have to tell you, this is so brave and so daring. I mean, I think about myself and whether or not I would be able to uproot a family of 6 and live a nomadic life. How did you come to this decision with your husband and your family?
Yeah, it's so funny because everyone expects that we had some big epiphany, and I wish we did. I wish we had some big, wonderful moment. Really, it came out of a morning walk that my husband had. After our 2 oldest kids came home from being adopted internationally, COVID happened and that shut down. Our kids came home February 2020, and we were in Virginia at the time, and Virginia shut down March 2020. And so
Right,
we had been homebound like everybody, right?
right.
And so my husband, Eric, one morning just goes on a morning walk. And by this time, COVID restrictions had started to lift. Our kids had just done one season of some fall soccer. So normalcy was kind of coming back. We had talked about traveling again because while we
Mhm.
were actually adopting, we had the chance to show our 2 biological kids from a couple countries while we were traveling to go visit our adopted kids that weren't legally ours and they weren't allowed to travel with us yet. And so we loved that. We were like, oh man, we want to show our kids as much of this as we can. So then Eric goes on a walk and he's like, hey, I had this thought. Oh, we've been saying we want to show the kids more of the world. Who doesn't want to show their kids the Eiffel Tower and take them to
Mm,
all the local places, right?
sure.
And so I was like, yeah, of course I want to do that, but what are we going to do? And he's like, I was thinking this winter, we don't have anything going on really. Our kids have always been homeschooled. My 2
Oh,
bio kids were homeschooled since they started their school careers. And
okay.
then as soon as my other 2 came home, they started being homeschooled. And so we weren't tethered to a school calendar. And he
Okay.
goes, since we have this winter time period of nothing going on, what if we leave the United States? What if we just go and do something? And I was like, I love that idea. Let's explore it. And so we started talking with some people. Where could we go? What could we do? And it did not start off as what we now refer to as a test trip. By the time we got on the airplane for that trip, it had become a test trip to become digital nomads.
Mm.
But when we first started, it was just this idea to go on a vacation, really, like a long vacation.
Oh,
And so we talked to our landlord and we said, hey, we want to do this. We're going to be gone for about 3.5 months. We are totally fine taking all of our stuff out. You can rent the house to someone else, or we'll pay 50% of the rent. My husband has a lot of sayings in his life, and one of them is, don't say someone's no for them. And he goes,
mm.
what's the worst that can happen if we ask our landlord this question? He's going to say, no, get all your stuff out so I can put another family in. He happened to say yes. He said, yeah, I'll take 50%. So we winterized the house as much as possible. So we didn't have lots of electric bills and that kind of stuff,
Mhm.
put things on vacation mode. And we left for Istanbul, Turkey.
Mm.
And we traveled in Europe a bit on some trains, and that was amazing. And then
Mhm.
when we got back to the United States, we said, this is the life we want. We want to live this life of not 100% knowing where the next location is going to be, totally immersed in the culture that you're in at that moment, but also knowing it's so different from the one you were previously in and different from the one you're about to head into. It's madness, but what I tell people is the culture shock is not a shock to us. It's almost like a comfort blanket. We love it so much. And so that's kind of how it all started. It started with my husband going on a morning walk and just having an idea of extended vacation.
That's incredible. And I can imagine going through the adoption process and having your kids experience that, get bitten by the travel bug, and then, oh my gosh, the world shuts down. And I can see that it's almost like this backlash of, yeah, we got to get out of here. We need to expand and got these
Yeah.
international kids. Let's be international.
Yeah, we totally felt that.
You can see the reality show bubbling up. Like, I know one of yours is Someone Feed Phil. I love that show too. It's
Oh
like,
my
oh my
gosh.
God, I want to go to that restaurant to eat that food. Wherever he is, I want to be there.
Yes.
It's so
I watched
great.
that show. I watched that show with my Google Maps open,
Say,
and no
okay, where
lie,
is
I searched the restaurants. We just watched the other day the Madrid one. And so
oh,
I have Madrid open on my Google Maps, and then I'm searching the restaurants and I'm like favoriting them to save. So when we get there, I just open it up and I'm like, okay, let's go to
this
this
is where we're
place.
going. By the way, everyone, Marissa is in Costa Rica, so she's nowhere near Madrid, but that'll be on
One day,
the list one
one day
day.
we'll get there.
Now, some people who are thinking of this, because more and more people are like, why just stay in one place? My gosh, mortgages are crazy these days. It's like everything is just so tremendously expensive. So why not? If you can make a living off of your computer, doing something that doesn't tie you down to one single location. I know that in your situation, you were already homeschooling, so that's not such a big departure. I know that for a lot of people, the kids are the anchor. You can't do anything until the kids go to college or if they're out of the home, and then you can go and do your cruises or what have you. But yeah, if you're interested in doing something like this, it's nice to start a little bit smaller, a little bit closer in, try it on for size.
Yeah, we encourage people all the time, do a test trip. Whatever you need to do to get ready for that, that's my biggest piece of advice for people that are considering this lifestyle, because then you're going to be able to have a conversation as a family about what happened. Hey, we really like this, but we want to stay in places longer. So for our test trip, we tried to do a mix of time periods in different places. And so we did about 2 months in Istanbul,
Mm-hmm.
and then we did 2 weeks in Prague, and then we did 1 month in Poland. And we were able to look at that and go, okay, well, the 2 weeks was too fast. You just get settled in and then you're packing your bag again. Like,
Got
not
it.
for us. People love that. It just
Mhm.
didn't work for Dinglers.
Right.
And so we said 1 month was nice if you're able to do a lot of stuff. Like if you want to do a lot of stuff really fast, 1 month is a good amount of time too. But if you want to get settled into a place and meet your neighbors and kind of get involved in the local community, we all agreed that 2 months is the minimum. And so we got back to have these conversations as a family. And then as you're getting ready to take that test trip, you can really think about your schedule and you can go, okay, well, here are some things that we need to have realistic conversations about, like bills, like cell phones, like school, like kids as extracurricular activities. How are our kids going to stay in communication with their current friends? That's huge.
Yeah.
A place doesn't mean your kids are going to leave their best friend. Like my 16-year-old son FaceTimes his best friend back in the United States almost daily. That's important to him and that's okay. But if you have young kids that maybe you don't want them to have technology, which I understand,
Yeah.
how are you going to navigate that? Like if your 6-year-old is used to seeing their best little buddy 3 days a week, that's going to be a big change for them. And so figuring out like, okay, maybe their mom will let them use their phone a couple times a week. They can have supervised phone calls, but these are the things that you can set up as you're getting ready to go on that test trip so that your kids can actually see what this lifestyle is going to be like. Now, the big caveat in our family, our kids don't make major decisions. We are not a democracy in our family. My husband and I make the decisions. However, we take our kids' opinions heavily into the decisions we're making.
Sure.
So if one of our kids were to look at us even after the test trip and have gone, I don't want to do that, I'm anti-digital nomad, we wouldn't have said, oh, okay, then none of us are going to do it. We would have said, what are you nervous about? What part of you enjoy? What are you resisting? Have a deeper conversation about it. And no one can really picture this lifestyle unless you're living. It's really hard to picture it. And so that test trip is going to give you guys all the same experiences and the same language to have a conversation when you get home. Okay, what worked? What didn't? What do we need to do before we sell it all and say goodbye? Your test trip is not going to be perfect, but it's going to highlight that you can work on so that when you make the decision to leave, your success rate is going to be so much higher and everyone's going to enjoy this lifestyle so much more.
I think about some of the families that I know, and even my own experiences growing up, where people get attached to home or they get attached to their things, their bikes, their little play cars, their things like that. And so certainly this is not necessarily a lifestyle for everyone. That doing a test is a great idea and important. And also knowing what your comforts are and what gives you a sense of security and safety. I remember going to a week-long summer camp where kids were just terribly homesick after day one or day two and could not bear to be away from from, whether it was home or whether it was mom and dad or whatnot, having mom and dad there may be all that they needed. And so, hey, going on a test trip, figuring that out, seeing what the comfort level is could be helpful. There was this other interesting story with some family friends of ours when one of their children was only like 3 months old and they had another child who was a toddler, decided to charter a yacht and go from California to the Far East. And I was like, wouldn't you be scared to have a child on a boat? And they're like, they loved it. They loved it. Oh, so and so was bitten by a monkey once we got there, but turns out okay. I was like, oh my
Everything's
gosh.
fine.
You
We're all fine.
know? But yeah, collecting those experiences and just having those moments together is a very special thing because a lot of
Yeah.
times families these days, Johnny might be in his room on his phone and Sally might be in her room on her computer and nobody really talks to each other anymore. And so being able to have a space where you're discovering things all together is quite a beautiful thing.
Yeah. And I think that that's a huge priority to us. It was a big priority even before we transitioned to a nomad family. Side note, even if you're a nomadic family, guys, it is so easy to like
Mm.
still do that separation. Like
Yeah.
we're right now in Costa Rica and each of my kids have their own bedroom for the first time ever. We've always
Oh.
done boys and girls room and now they have their own rooms and
Mm.
I'm noticing it and I'm like freaking out. I'm like, this is a new challenge for me. What do we do? I don't know how to navigate this. Like this is new for me. Years ago, I had this thought in my head of, am I making the most of my life? It came from a book. And in the book, he talks about how on your tombstone, we have our birthday and then a dash and then our death day.
Mhm.
And all of us are living that dash. And that's what represents our life. Like that
Mhm.
little dash on
Mhm.
that tombstone is what you did. If you think about the dash as a continuum, like with years, you don't know where you are. I'm almost 35. If I live to be 40, I'm a very old woman.
Mhm.
If I live to be 90, I'm middle aged, but I
Mhm.
don't know how many years I have. And
Yeah.
so every single day, it's kind of like carpe diem, if you will. And so that message in that book just really stuck with me. And so
Mhm.
much so that my husband and I actually have dash tattoos on our hands
Mm.
to remind us constantly that we are living that dash of our life.
Mhm.
And that's why, like, if you ever see us on social media, we're the family of dashes.
Yep.
That's where that comes from. Every single person has their own dash that's going to represent their life on a tombstone one day. And what are you doing with it? And so I think whether or not you become a nomadic family, the question is, are you living your life intentionally? All of us have something that we're supposed to be doing. If part of it is being a nomadic family, awesome, do it. Like, stop finding excuses. But if it's not a nomadic family, then that's okay too. I just think it's a beautiful thing that people can have different lifestyles as long as we're all living intentionally.
A couple of years ago, I came across a poem called The Dash by Linda Ellis. And I actually did a TikTok where I was reading the poem and I set it to music. And I was amazed because at the time I didn't have very many followers. I still don't, frankly. I'm a lousy TikToker. But the actual woman, Linda, who wrote the poem, responded and said, "Thank you so much. I've never heard it read that way. I usually hear it at funerals. I loved the way that you did it." So if you go on my TikTok, you'll see it. But
That's
I wanted to
awesome.
take a few minutes now for those of you who aren't familiar, because it is such a powerful poem and it's very suitable given Marissa's dash and the family of dashes to read this so that you can also contemplate the words for yourself. And it goes like this. I read of a man who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend. He referred to the dates on the tombstone from the beginning to the end. He noted that first came the date of birth and spoke the following date with tears, but he said what mattered most of all was the dash between those years. For that dash represents all the time that they spent alive on earth, and now only those who loved them know what that little line is worth. For it matters not how much we own, the cars, the house, the cash. What matters is how we live and love and how we spend our dash. So think about this long and hard. Are there things you'd like to change? For you never know how much time is left. That still can be rearranged. If we could just slow down enough to consider what's true and real, and always try to understand the way other people feel, and be less quick to anger, and show appreciation more, and love the people in our lives like we've never loved before. If we treat each other with respect and more often wear a smile, remembering this special dash might only last a little while. So when your eulogy is being read with your life's actions to rehash, would you be proud of the things they say and how you spent your dash? Beautiful, huh?
Oh my gosh, that is amazing.
Now you can have it printed out and bring it wherever you go, Miss Family of Dashes.
Love with that. That is gorgeous.
And I think that it's so profound. Like those little things that we see as symbols mean so much. They get distilled down to a line, a little blip.
Yep.
And truly, the time that we have here on earth is not that much. And so it is a reminder, are we making the most of it for ourselves? Are we living the way that we want to? Are we doing everything that we can to get the most and juice everything out of the present moment? If that means doing more of what you love, dancing a little more, seeing the sunshine a little bit more, petting your cat a little bit more, no matter what it is, if you feel that you can really be in the present moment and living the life as you want to, then that's your dash. You own that dash. I love that.
That's amazing. You're so right.
So, Marissa, I think that people are very interested in hearing some of your stories. You have to tell us what you think was one of the more special moments on your travels.
Sure. There's been a lot of different special things. I would say for me personally, anytime my kids get to celebrate a birthday in a different culture is really cool.
Yeah.
For two of my kids, we were in the Amazon rainforest last year. We went to a very small eco lodge because we like to do smaller things and make sure that we are conscious of the carbon footprint. It was fantastic. The staff was so great. And we loved it because we had our own two guides for the six of us the entire time we were there. So we weren't with other people. It was just the six of us. Like, us, and it was perfect. And so it was Ryan's birthday, and our one guide was named Segundo, and Segundo spoke no English, but he was amazing. He was like everything that my boys idolize is what Segundo is. Like this man can hunt, he can fish, he can drive a boat. He plays instruments. He's a pastor at a church. He lives in the jungle. He plays. He just gets in the water and plays with the kids, puts mud all over him, throws mud at them. That is Segundo. And so on Ryan's birthday, Segundo invited us to his home, which was very near the lodge. And so we walk over to Segundo's home. And while we're there, he pulls out a harmonica and plays Happy Birthday to Ryan on his harmonica on his birthday as we're standing in his home. It was just so great. I think as a parent watching other people from other cultures love on your kids in those ways, you're just like standing there and your heart's overflowing like, oh my gosh. If you would have told me that on my son's 9th birthday, you're going to be in an eco lodge in the middle of nowhere, Peru, and this man who speaks no English is going to play Happy Birthday on his harmonica, and that's going to be the cherry on top of your day, I'd have been like, what's wrong with you? But it was just so awesome. And we've had multiple birthdays now in other cultures, but that one really stands out as special.
That's gorgeous. What a beautiful story.
Yeah, it was just really, really sweet. And then for me, probably my favorite, people laugh at me when I say this because it is so weird and it's not magical whatsoever. Okay. My favorite place, like if I could just sit somewhere all day, I'm going to go to London and go to Kensington Gardens. I'm going to sit at the Peter Pan statue. That's where you will find me. If I could just teleport anywhere, it's the Peter Pan statue. Every single time I go there, I cry. And my kids just laugh at me and they're like, why are you crying? It's just Peter Pan. I'm looking at Peter Pan, the boy who didn't want to grow up, and I'm living these amazing experiences with my kids. And I'm like, I don't want you to grow up. I want you to stay this little, but at the same time, I want you to grow up and have your own life and your own wonderful experience yourself. Peter Pan always makes me cry and my kids don't understand it. So they'd be like, yeah, mom's weird. Mom's weird in London.
That is very interesting, but you never know what's going to evoke those emotions in anyone. It could be anything, but that's very special for you. That's wonderful. Now, I'm sure that a lot of people are questioning, okay, well, what if something happens and someone gets hurt? What about the health? What about hospital? Like, how do I know that my kids and my family are going to be safe? What if we get some rare infectious disease? What are some of the things that you've had to battle, or what kind of tips might you be able to give to others that might be a little bit gun shy about that?
Totally. So we actually, for the first time in our lives, had our ER visit. So first ER visit ever was 6 weeks ago now. One of our kids had been sick, but we just thought it was kind of like a flu. And we're like, oh, we're just going to let it run its course. You just keep an eye on it like I would have done if I was in the States. My other kid, a few days later, walks out and is swollen, like
Oh.
big time. They say, "Hey, mom, I think something's wrong." I'm sitting at the table with my computer and my coffee, and I just look up and I go, "Yes, yes, something is wrong."
And what country were you in at that time?
We were in San Salvador, El Salvador. So we were
Oh,
in
okay.
big city, San Salvador. We go to the hospital, they do blood work and an ultrasound. We find out this child has mumps.
Oh.
Later on, we figure out, okay, mumps is actually kind of like the flu. You are vaccinated for a certain strain. So my
Mm.
kids were vaccinated against the mumps that is present in the United States. Apparently, San Salvador has different mumps. We had to do all the things to help them take care of the mumps. I say this because everyone thinks, oh my gosh, what if the worst happens, right? Your kid's going to get hurt.
Mhm.
The nice thing is, there are things you can do to prepare for that. So, anytime we get into a country, I tell people, for us, we contact the US Embassy. If you're listening to this in Australia and England, wherever, you need to
Mm.
contact your embassy and ask them just flat out, if something bad happens, what ER am I going to? They'll tell you. Like,
Okay.
those are citizens from your passport country that live there. Like, they have families there too. They know where they're going to go. Like, they know
Mhm.
which is the good one. So just shoot them a message. We always stay in big cities, with the exception of going out on activities. So, like,
Okay.
when we went to Amazon, we were nowhere near a hospital. So I was just very much like, you can't get hurt or sick. Like, that's just not an option, because if you do, we have a 2 hour boat ride and then about an hour bus ride to a hospital. So it's not an option. Like, there are definitely moments like that you're going to feel.
Mhm.
But when you prepare and you know which hospital to go to, you know, you can figure out, okay, which medication is my kid going to take? You need to know like the local name for ibuprofen or Tylenol. And that's pretty easy to just Google.
Sure.
And getting medication in other countries is actually way easier than getting it even in the United States, because
Mm.
most pharmacies are not super
Regulated.
more casual.
Mm.
You just walk in and you're like, I need an antibiotic. And they're like, great. Know if you're allergic to something. Like me
Mhm.
and one of my kids are allergic to penicillin.
Mm.
You know that, because they're not going to ask you, like, not at a pharmacy. If you have to go to the hospital, they will, but know what you're allergic to.
Mhm.
And then people are like, okay, what about insurance? So
Mhm.
me and my family, we don't carry travel insurance. We always pay out of pocket. The
Mm.
reason I told you about my kid going to the ER, I hadn't asked a thing about money up to this point. I'm like,
Mm.
my kid ultrasound, my kid needs the blood work, my kid needs these things. And as a parent, you're not sitting there calculating, right? Like, well, we can only afford blood work. Like, no, whatever you need to
Yeah.
do, figure out what's wrong. I say a prayer. I'm like, okay, God, you know what's wrong with her. You know what I can afford in my budget. Just help us out. And we walk up to the treasurer area where you pay, like the registers,
Mhm.
and calculated it all up. And it was $96 flat for everything, for
Oh
an
my
ER visit,
goodness.
for the ultrasound, for the blood work, for the doctor,
Wow.
$96. I'm not going to even worry about submitting that to my insurance. We do carry insurance in the United States just because of things that have happened like legally in the United States. They like it when you have insurance,
Mm.
but it's literally like the lowest of the low insurance. So the insurance we carry through the United States does cover foreign ER visits. But it's kind of a pain in the butt to go through submitting it all, because ER visits are fast and they're in a hurry and they feel like an emergency. They feel like a crisis, right? We're not just going to stop. Like, in that moment when my kid had a swollen jaw, I wasn't going to
Yeah.
call the insurance company and go, so can we talk about this? Like, I'm just going to go.
Right.
And so what we do is we just budget a little bit every month, and we basically create our own health savings account. And we just know, okay, this is how much we have in our personal HSA, and we just pull it from there anytime our kids are sick or hurt. Thankfully, our kids are not unhealthy kids. Like, we've been very blessed in the health of our children. Now, as far as getting hurt, that's going to happen.
Mhm.
The one thing I will tell parents, don't let that be the thing that keeps you from
Mhm.
traveling, because your kid's going to get hurt at the local playground. Your kid's
Yeah.
going to get hurt coming down the stairs in your own house. Your kid's going to get hurt, and all we can do is be prepared for it. So we actually had a friend in El Salvador, their kid broke their arm, and with the x-rays, with the cast, with all the things, I think they were sitting at about $250 for all that.
Wow.
Like, not bad. So thankfully, in many other parts of the world, now Western Europe is a little trickier. They're a little more similar to a US,
Mm.
expensive as the US, but a little bit more. But if you're in a place like Asia, a lot of African countries, Eastern European, we've done doctors in Eastern European, and then Central South America, we've done
Mhm.
doc blood work and all that kind of stuff. The standards might be a little different. One time I needed blood work, and we were in Peru, and you know, like what you blow a ball up with, like you put it on the pump. It's like the needle that you put on the pump to blow a ball up.
Yes.
I am pretty sure that is what they used to get the blood out of my arm. There was no tube. There was no nothing. They like honestly took a ball pump, sharpened it up and like, that'll work. And so they just stuck it in my arm and it just dripped into a vial. And I'm like, this is how we're doing this, people. This. And so you have to like make sure it's clean, make sure it's hygienic. Like if they're going to prick you with anything, make sure that's new. And like, you know what I mean? Like, is that clean? Is that new? And if you feel uncomfortable, ask them to get a new one so you can like see them open it. Arm, like certain little things like that. Speak up for yourself. As far as your kids getting preventable diseases, definitely talk to an international doctor. And a lot of hospitals have these. They have like a special even department. And so just find out, hey, we're going to this part of the world. Are there any special vaccines that my kids should get before we go? Some countries you're required to have certain vaccines. A lot of countries you're not, but that doesn't mean that you can't still take the medicine. So here in Central America, there are some places, and in South America, there are some places with malaria.
Right.
You do need to ask those questions. And thankfully, malaria drugs have come really far. And now there's a couple ones that have like no side effects. And so to take that medication, to have your kids take that medication, you're not harming yourself. Now, if you are like, you really don't want to take medicine, then this could be a little tricky for you.
Yeah.
But if you're comfortable taking some preventative meds like that, then just do it. Talk to your doctor before you leave, or talk to a doctor in like a larger hospital. So like if you like here in San Jose, where we are right now, I could go and get some malaria medication. Like if I knew the next place we're going is malaria heavy, I could get malaria medication here. But if we were to go to a small town in Costa Rica, that'd be a little tricky. Think ahead in your planning and go, okay, we're going to be in this country. It does have XYZ. And so we need to get vaccinated against that. When do we need to get vaccinated? How long, like, do you have to, like some malaria meds, you have to take 2 weeks prior to being there. Some you don't. So there are some questions that you need to ask as far as those preventable, like tropical diseases. But as far as like the sniffles or your kid getting hurt, I would say just know where the local hospital is, because that's going to happen. But I would tell someone that if they were moving to a new town in the United States, like what hospital, like you got to know the hospital, you got to know your doctor, like you need to know these. And then as far as like teeth go, we've been to so many dentists all over the world at this point, and they rock. I'll tell you that much. Like,
oh, okay.
Yeah. Like it's cheap and they're good. Love
That's
it.
really good to know.
Yeah. So much better than any dental experience we've had in the United States. So Mexico City is actually, so medical tourism. I don't know if you've heard of that, is a thing.
Yeah.
And Mexico City is a medical tourism hub for teeth. So anyone needs dental work, fly out of Mexico City. The food's great. The weather rocks. The Coca-Cola is delicious.
It is. Mexican Coke.
Mexican Coke just rocks. Like it just does. It lives up to the hype.
Yeah. And I just found out that Mexico is actually the most popular digital nomad destination in the world. Thailand is the second most popular, very interestingly enough, for those of you who need to know those tips. Wow.
Mexico City is actually working with Airbnb and UNESCO to figure out how to make Mexico City like the hub for digital nomads.
Wow.
I totally understand why it rocks.
Interesting.
Amazing.
And a lot of people wouldn't know that, I think, that we're not digital nomad. Like, so I know that you consider yourself slow digital nomads and that you go minimum 2 months, 3, maybe a little bit more, but how do you decide where you're going to go next? Like, how far out are you planning?
That is a great question. We didn't know we were coming to Costa Rica until like 2 weeks before we came to Costa Rica.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes we know really far in advance. Other times we don't. And that is a big difference between single or couple digital nomads and digital nomads. Because as a family, you do need to do certain things more in advance, because like we have to buy 6 plane tickets. Like if I was a single woman, I could just wake up
and go.
Yeah, I need 6. That's a lot. It's a lot of plane tickets. It's a lot for my budget. It's just a lot. And so we do try to have the next country. So we were planning to stay in Costa Rica until end of November. We've decided I'm in a language school here, and I was going to do 2 6-week courses, but we've decided to extend it a little bit into December. And then the plan was to go straight to Madrid, Spain. Now we're thinking, well, like we really want to do Christmas markets in Germany, because that's like, why not? And so we're like, well, since we're staying here till December, maybe we'll just go to Germany and do Christmas markets and then make our way down to Spain. The hard thing is when you're thinking about where you want to go next, when we're thinking about where we want to go next, we take a few things into consideration. One, time zone. My husband owns his own company, and the majority of his clients are in the United States. And we're not to the point yet where he can stop taking meetings. It's in a beautiful transition to like where it is becoming where he doesn't have to be so hands-on. I would say it's like a toddler at this point, like need to be involved, but maybe like someone else can babysit for a little while versus like that newborn that's like only wants mommy. And so we're in a transition, but we really need to take into consideration time zone. And so for us, that's why we've been in Central and South America, because the time zone is just perfect.
Right.
But we feel like come December, we can get a little bit more of a difference in that time zone. Also, Spanish culture is very late night.
Yes.
And so he has to work until like 7, 8 o'clock, and then we go hang out with friends. That's normal. So that would work. And so then something else we take into consideration is what is available for the kids. Like, are there sports teams that are starting up that we want them to be involved in? Are there any groups, anything like that? So we take that into consideration as well. And then price. I do not love to hang out. I know I just said we're going to Madrid. I don't love to hang out in Western Europe. It's expensive. Like, it just is. Like, restaurants are expensive. Rent is expensive.
Yeah.
Transportation, pretty expensive. It's just an expensive place of the world. It's gorgeous, and I love it. And if I had an unlimited amount of money, I would totally just hang out in Western Europe my entire life.
Sure.
We definitely take cost into consideration. And so those are kind of all of our factors that we think. We just go, okay, what do we need right now? And what kind of takes a higher priority? If our budget is feeling a little tight, then we put that at the highest priority. If Eric is in like a really busy season of work, we put time zone at a high priority. And so for us, it shifts.
Got it.
What we're looking for. So that's why we've never been to Southeast Asia, and we cannot wait to get to, like, we have friends, we know people that live in Southeast Asia. We have friends that lived in Southeast Asia for almost 2 years, and they fell in love with it, and they came back just raving about it.
Yes.
We can't wait to spend time there, but the time zone is just too significant right now. And I think that as a family, you do need to really think about that kind of stuff.
True. And do you think that you'll be doing this lifestyle forever? Is this something that you think, okay, maybe for a few years and then I'll come back to Norfolk, Virginia or Ohio and or is this something that you think is sustainable?
I do think it's sustainable. My biggest thing is, now we are nowhere near this. So like, if my kids listen to this, don't get any ideas. As soon as I get grandbabies, I will be with them. Like, I plan to be like the most like involved grandmother that the world has ever seen. Now we're 16. So we're nowhere near. That's what I'm saying. We're nowhere near it. So, but I'm very comfortable doing this lifestyle as long as we feel like it's sustainable, as long as we feel like, hey, it's working for us. We don't have an end date. Most of our kids, we have one kid that might do the college thing, but we definitely don't fall into the like traditional viewpoint of you need to attend like a 4-year college type family. We don't. We have one kid that at the moment, the career they're thinking about would require a college degree. But even then, we would probably do something like online university or like a university in Europe, because they're just so much cheaper in Europe and the education is amazing.
Right.
And so once our kids get to that maybe like 18-year-old, like 18 to 25-year-old age range, we'll start figuring like, hey, what's best? Like, what do they need? A couple of our kids are going to need Eric and I to support them a little bit longer than maybe people are used to supporting their kids. They're going to like live with us a little bit longer, and we're totally fine with that. And so that's kind of our thing. But we definitely have some exit, like forced exits, if you will.
Sure.
And we've said, anything happens with as our parents get older and we feel like we need to be there for them, that takes it.
Good point.
If we feel like it's doing lasting damage to our kids. So our kids are being raised as what's called third culture kids, TCKs. It's a term that's becoming a lot more popular. You might hear it a little bit more. If we feel like that's doing lasting damage to them, we'll stop. At the moment, we don't. At the moment, we feel like being in different cultures is enriching their lives and is adding to it versus taking away from it. But if for some reason we feel like, oh no, this is not good for them, like in a long mental health way, then
Sure.
Eric and I might consider we need to stop. We need to do something else. That doesn't mean we're going to stay in the United States, like move back to Norfolk. A big reason we're going to Madrid is because Spain has created the first digital nomad family visa. A lot of countries have
Oh.
digital nomad visas, but Spain is the first one that allows you to add on immediate family members that aren't the actual digital nomad themselves. So it
Oh.
would be really easy for Eric to get a digital nomad visa in any country like that
Mhm.
has a digital visa. But
Mhm.
I couldn't because I'm not making any money. I'm a stay-at-home mom and I take care of my kids and I teach them. Like, I mean,
Mhm.
I work, but I don't get paid for it. And
Sure.
so I can't get a digital nomad visa. My
Mhm.
kids can't get digital nomad visas because they're not digital nomads on paper.
Mhm.
But Spain has said, okay, we want the families to come because family digital nomads is really increasing in the past few years.
Yeah.
And so with this visa, the nomad, the digital nomad, so Eric will apply for it. And then they just say, how many dependents do you have? And then you have to pay like an additional fee for each one. So we'll just tack the 5 of us on.
Mhm.
That will allow us to stay in Spain for a year and we can renew it up to 5 times.
Oh.
The reason we're doing that is because that's going to give our kids a little more stability. Not that we feel like anything's been unstable. It's going to allow them to explore some interests. So we have one kid that loves art. And so we have
Mm.
art school that they can
Yeah.
be in and just explore these interests a little bit deeper as they're starting to get older now. But since it's Madrid, we can jump on a train and be in Belgium like that.
Right, right.
Or budget airlines are so cheap in Europe. You just
Yeah.
jump on a Ryan or a Wizz Air and you're in a new country. And so we'll have that like stability in Madrid, but still with the adventure element
Being able to
of
venture off.
like wherever we
Mhm.
want to go. And then after a year, we'll evaluate like, hey, are we in a place where we feel like the time zone is going to allow us to maybe go somewhere else, maybe deeper into Asia? Do we feel like financially we can afford a different place? We can evaluate in a year then. And so while we don't have an end time to that I see us going back to Norfolk, for us, this idea of being a digital nomad family is always evolving. And so we
Mhm.
might go through a period of fast travel, like we're in these places for just a couple weeks each location. Or when we get to Madrid, it's going to be this very different type of lifestyle. And I think that that's kind of what you have to be open to when you're living this life
Yeah.
is just the fluidity of it.
I love that you give the recommendation to almost have this attitude of instead of like, what's the worst that can happen, think about what's the best that can happen. Like, really look at the glass half full and then be pragmatic about it all along the way. Do your planning, do your homework, do your research, have your Google Translate there if you need it.
It has come a long way
Right?
and it's so helpful. So helpful.
So very helpful. So very helpful. Well, Marissa, thank you so much for all of these valuable tips. And it's so fascinating to hear about how you're doing it because it helps other people really see themselves potentially getting into this lifestyle as well. And you're helping others to recognize that it's not as scary. Putting one foot in front of the other is what life is all about. And why not do a little bit of exploring while you've got your dash in play?
Exactly.
Well, much love to Eric and the family, and best wishes there in Costa Rica. I hope that it is just a wonderful, wonderful time there and wherever you
Of
may roam next. Can't wait to follow along on your own podcast and your blog to see where you head.
Yes. Yeah. We have a lot of fun with the podcast. It's good. So
Yes. So,
like
for
to
those
say
of you
that.
who want to have another look at what Eric and Marissa are doing, go over to the Digital Nomad podcast, which is available wherever you stream podcasts as well. Do take
Yeah.
a look at achieveadoption.org as well as In Transit Studios, which is Eric's business for those of you who are interested in some marketing assistance. Marissa, thanks very much, and we'll be seeing you.
Of course. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Human Beauty Movement podcast. Be sure to follow, rate, and review us wherever you stream podcasts. The Human Beauty Movement is a community-based platform that cultivates the beauty of humankind. Check out our workshops, find us on social media, and share our inspiration with all the beautiful humans in your life. Learn more at thehumanbeautymovement.com. Thank you so much for being a beautiful human.